am Julia Monte, and I am a women's fiction author. Thank you for joining us here on my channel. And today we have a special guest. I'm really excited because we've worked together in the past. And I was super lucky. I think you were Latoya, assistant editor at the time,
Yes.
and then became an associate editor. So maybe you could tell us a little bit even what that means to people that don't
Yeah,
know.
sure. Sure.
So
So when you come into publishing, they have different levels, and entry level is basically editorial assistant. You're usually assisting multiple people. I was assisting 2 editors at that time, one of which was your editor. And then once you hit assistant editor, that's when you can start acquiring books on your own and bringing in authors on your own. You're usually working with your boss on those books to kind of make sure you know what you're doing, and then you continue to go up the ladder to associate editor, then full-fledged editor, senior editor, and so forth.
wow. It's like
Yes.
college. I work at a college, and you have all these different steps, and it's like,
Yes.
where are you?
Yes. Exactly.
Um, so yeah, I guess first of all, I'm gonna just ask you maybe to introduce yourself. I've reading your bio, and it's super impressive. I mean, you've like
Thank you.
won all kinds of awards and been on C-SPAN, and so I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Thank
And so
you.
tell us a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and then
Sure.
about your agency.
Sure. So my name is Latoya Smith. I am a developmental editor freelance, and I'm also a literary agent. My background, I was an acquisitions editor for some New York publishers for, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 years. I worked at a couple of different ones. And the most recent one that I worked on at before I started my own company was Sam Hain Publishing. And then when they folded, I started my own company, LCS Literary Services, where I first began just offering developmental editing, consultations, and things like that. And then about 6 months later, I became an agent with the L. Perkins Agency. And I stayed there for about 2 years and kind of learned the ropes of sort of the differences between being an editor and being an agent. And then in 2018, I kind of folded everything into my own company, where I still do some developmental editing, but mainly I'm a literary agent. And I, take on quite a variety of titles that we could talk about, or I can mention now. Women's fiction, romance, some thriller, suspense, and some historical, but I'm not quite big on historical or sci-fi fantasy as much as I would like. And then for nonfiction, I do take some memoir advice, relationship books, health and wellness. But of course, as we know, it's really dependent upon your audience and your reach and your platform that we hate to talk about. But I always say the idea is that with nonfiction, you have to bring the audience to the publisher. So you want to keep that in mind. As you're crafting these stories, what is it that you bring to the table that the public who does not know you will purchase your project. So and I've just kind of dipped into some young adult fiction, so that's exciting, kind of
Wow.
learning and meeting new editors and things like that. And so that's been pretty cool, kind of learning what
Yeah.
works in children's, which is different than what works in adult. Actually, I think it's way more diverse in
Yeah.
terms of subject matter, content, storylines. It's pretty cool. So yeah, it's nice.
Wow. Well, actually, this sparked a couple of additional questions in my mind. So
Sure.
when, when, like on your, well, a couple of them, let's see, you mentioned actually in your, on your website
Hmm.
that, and she has all of this on this, so you can go back to her website and see
Yes.
if all the things that she represents. But some of the things were like high
Yes.
concept, women's fiction and thrillers. What does that mean, that term high concept? And
Yeah.
well, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, sure. So, I think when it comes to women's fiction and romance, especially, it's almost like you see similar plot lines,
Hmm.
but it's sort of like what you bring to the table. What's the hook? What makes your story different from the 5 other rom-coms that are out there, the 10 other contemporary romance novels that are out there? So when I say high concept, I mainly mean like what is the hook? What makes this commercial? What makes this a broad project that will appeal to the largest audience? And so, I think there's a difference between upmarket or literary versus
Right.
commercial. It's just the language, how it's written, is it character driven? Is it, narration style, things like that. But,
Yeah.
for me, high concept is just something that's different, and not so
Okay.
different that I don't know how to sell it, but just different in the way that, it just stands out, whether it's your voice, it's your characters, or maybe it is something unique in the plot. But it has to be something that's not just the same old, I've read this story 8 times. Like, what is it
Right.
that makes your story different?
Okay, okay, that's great. That's great. Yeah, because I think a lot of times it's hard to figure out like what is it that these some of these terms mean.
Yes,
And
yes,
then the other question is that you mentioned the platform,
yes.
and how important is it for fiction writers compared to so nonfictions? Yeah, you
Oh
need to have
yeah.
that platform, but how about fiction authors? I think fiction authors have a harder time with that. I remember
Yeah, you know
actually
what?
having I think it was Beth de Guzman who
Hmm.
sat with me and
Yes.
said, "Okay, tell me about your platform," and I was like, "What? What do you mean?"
I think with any author, whether you write fiction or nonfiction, it's nice if you come with, something, you've got a website, you're on some form of social media. That way they can kind of take what you have and grow it, especially
Okay.
for a fiction writer, because again, with nonfiction, you pretty much want those things in place in
Yeah.
addition to having great content. But with
Right.
fiction, I think the idea is a little different, which is more that you have a marketable story that the publisher knows how to sell, so it's not as important that you
Okay.
have those things set up, especially because for a traditional publisher, they're working so far out. Like, you have time to build your website and start, reaching out. But I don't think there's
Right.
anything wrong right now in your beginning stages of networking. You
Right.
will always be networking throughout your career. So what does it hurt to start following other authors, retweeting if they're promoting things, and just being a fan, a reader, which I'm sure
Right.
you are anyway. And then as that is kind of, that is growing, then when you're ready to start, 3 to 6 months before your book is coming out, you're starting to promote, you're starting to do things. Now you're going to be taking analytics of those numbers and like doing things to grow those numbers. So, you want to start somewhere, but no, I don't think you have to have a website or anything when you're first starting out as a fiction writer. But it is nice to have something, even if it's a personal Facebook. I mean, your friends and family are probably the first people that you're going to promote to. So,
Right.
and then
Right.
eventually you worry about the business pages and things like that. But right now, just do what you're most comfortable with. And I think that eventually, you'll get to know your people, what they're responding to, and then you'll start to use that as well as your research of other authors in the market, and you'll be able to
Right.
combine all those things and see what works for you. And I always say, take note of these things so that you're not wasting your time and money and resources in doing things. Because if this doesn't work, then why do it next year? You want to say, okay,
Right.
we're not going to do that, but we'll try these ideas, that I didn't try this time around. And it's
Yeah.
just a constant, game of trying to connect with people and say, okay, great. Yes, we could talk about the weather in our city, but P.S., I have a book, you know. So it doesn't have to be a constant commercial or anything like that
Right.
or feel awkward. I mean, you just relate on a
Yeah.
human level on things that you
Yeah.
just that interest you, and then you peddle your book in there too.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And I think that's part of it. I think it became more and more, at least evident to me, that how important that was.
Hmm.
Because yeah, at first you don't really know. You think you're going to be a writer and you're just going to sit home and write, but no, you really need to be out there and you need to
Yes,
people need to know who you are, and like you said,
exactly.
more on a relationship level too. Like, what else are you
Hmm.
interested in? You're a writer, but what else?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic. And so how do you find it different having like being an agent, right? Because you're used to, as the editor, you're used to dealing with agents, and now you are the
Yes.
agent.
Yes.
So
Um,
how,
it was definitely an adjustment,
right?
just in the sense of, I was used to being pitched and being
Mm-hmm.
sold, and now I have to pitch and sell. So it's like a different mindset, kind of. It's very humbling,
Yes.
you know. I
Yes.
mean, I know authors get upset when they get rejected, but we get rejected over and over and over again,
Right.
and for the ones that, because I think most agents have like a set three or four when they're pitching, like, all right, these are my strong ones. And so if they pass, it's like, oh, it's kind of like, so we feel that hurt with you, where I think with the publisher, unless you lose something in auction, normally you have
Yes.
more, of a upper hand, if you will. So I
Right.
think, being an agent, it is very much contacts. I'm constantly meeting new editors, talking to new editors, where it was the opposite. Like, I would wait kind of for the agents to find me. So it's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
it's different in that sense. Also, I think once the deal is made, it's you could kind of like sit back and just oversee and just make sure things are okay. But the day to day, it's not as grueling to me as I feel like it was as an acquisitions editor, because there's so many
Yeah.
different steps to publishing a book, from when we read it, as a submission, through making sure art's doing what they're supposed to, publicity, like you are in charge of everyone, and
Yeah.
making sure
Yeah.
they're doing the right thing as this book goes from submission to printed book. It's a lot. Whereas with the agent, once the book is sold, you kind of like let them do their thing, and you really only come in if you need to, or for covers. I like to be a part of that. I like to be a part of marketing conversations. But like,
Yes.
unless there's an issue, I can kind of move on to my next author. But as an acquisitions editor, I've got to be aware of those things for every single author I have. And when I was at Hachette, I had like 24 plus authors. So you're
Yeah.
talking about different stages of different things for all of those people. It's a lot. Whereas
Right.
again, with
Yeah.
the agency, yes, there's follow up and there's things like that, but I have different charts and stuff, and I'm pretty much good as long as I'm following up when I'm supposed to. Like, I'm not as responsible for so many different people. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right, right, right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's interesting, because I think a lot of times as writers we think, well, the editor's just sitting there reading my book or reading my story, and it's like, no, right? Yeah, you're busy.
Honestly, we're spending
Yeah,
our nights and weekends reading your stuff, because
yes,
during the
yes,
day, there's so many meetings, so many moving
yes.
parts, that you have to provide, that it's like, crap, it's 4 o'clock and I haven't even edited those chapters yet. And that's, again, of your authors. That's not even submissions.
Yeah, yeah,
That's just the people you've contracted. You know what
exactly.
I'm saying?
Yes.
So it is a lot. So give them some time, guys. Like, if they're taking too long to get back to you, or if you've turned in your manuscript and you're like, I was supposed to hear back from her 2 weeks ago. Trust, like, they're probably, and then now with COVID, trying to
Uh,
do things without being able to say, hey, so and so, what about this? And
right.
now you have to wait for people to get back to you. It can be
It
tough. It can
it's
be
even
tough.
harder. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, well, that kind of brings me to another question: is how long? So somebody that you have in contact, or so as an agent,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's somebody who's not your client who has sent you a query or whatever it
Hmm.
is that you require. Uh,
Yes.
how long is it appropriate to wait before sending an email, or do you want them to contact you? Do you just want them to, what's a reasonable time?
Um, I definitely understand the need to follow up, because there are some editors, agents who don't respond or do need a nudge. I would say 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes even 8 to 10, especially depending on like the time of year. So like
Yes.
right now, nobody's really doing anything. So think about, like, everyone's trying to get their things together off their desks. They're in holiday mode right now.
Right.
So,
Right.
January, it might be really busy. So if you send something out in January, you might want to give them a couple of months, versus maybe, in the spring, summer, where people have a little more vacation time, they're kind of just hanging out. It's the summertime, just be mindful of that. So I would say six to
Okay.
eight weeks. I think 1 or 2 follow-ups is more than enough. And if they don't get back to you after the second follow-up, I would just kind of mark them off my list. And then, when you do your second round,
Right.
if you happen to have to go back to that publisher or that agency, I would definitely be transparent, and just say, hey,
Okay.
I sent it to so and so, I never heard back, or they passed, but
Yeah.
I feel like you might be a better fit, you can definitely do something like that. But I would say after one or two times, that, and I mean, it's not to say they won't come, get back to you eventually. Cause
Right.
I even have some editors like, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm behind. And it's been
Yeah.
like 4 months,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's just, yeah. Yeah. So I would say 6 to 8 weeks,
Okay.
is a
Yeah.
reasonable time.
All right. That sounds reasonable. Okay. So, how about a little bit, then let's see. How is your agency unique or different from other agencies? So if I'm looking for an
Mhm.
agent, what why would I want to contact you?
A lot of folks want to work with me, number one, because a lot of my work speaks for itself. So they can see the deals, I'm making. They may have talked to someone I work with and they like my personality or my professionalism, or my passion. I've had clients want to work with me because they're like, you're young, you're hungry, you want it, so I want to work with you. So I feel like most of the people who work with me, that is a reason they've heard about what I can do. And then a second reason is I just might, work on some of the things that they work on. So they feel like, especially as a woman of color, I do
Yeah,
get a lot of authors of color, that want to work with me. They feel like I get their stories, I get their writing, et cetera. Women
right.
as well. I get a lot of female clients, for that reason as well. But I do think, realistically, one of my challenges is that I do work by myself. So
Okay.
I do think there are some authors that want a bigger agency feel, or want,
Hmm.
someone that has, this person, that person, like all these different hands. But me personally, I feel like that should give me the edge over, because you're not just one on a list and I'm just flinging my assistant at you. Like, I'm
Right.
actually working with you directly. And I try to get back to everyone within a reasonable time frame, even if I'm like, hey, let's set up a call. I might not be able
Yeah.
to jump right on the phone, but like, you can contact me, you can get in touch with me. So, and then I feel like also my list is very small and kind of like direct because of that. So I try to be in love with every project I take on, so that speaks, kind of when I'm
Right.
pitching. And the hope is that, I just kind of seal the deal. Also,
Yeah.
my contacts, having been an acquisitions editor, I kind of know more insight about the publishers, how they work, how we should prepare things, and even to have a relationship with them to say, hey, what are you looking for? I've got this writer with this skill set. I've had that happen where we actually talk about, oh, I'm looking for this. All right, go write that. And then now I've made a deal, So I
Right.
like that too, because it's just like, if I have that relationship where I can kind of do a shoe in, we're not spinning our wheels, we're actually doing a project that you're passionate about, the publisher wants it. It's kind of like, who wouldn't want that? So,
Right. Right.
I feel like those are probably the main things that bring people my way.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's huge, actually, to be able to work directly with an agent rather than an assistant and have that relationship with your agent. I think that's super
Hmm.
important. Because yeah, it's like, your agent becomes like your best friend. You're the
Exactly.
like, hey, how did it go? You cry together when
Yes.
things don't.
Yes. Or scream and cry together when you make
Yes.
deals that you're like, oh my God, can you believe this? I
Yeah, yeah.
definitely have
Your
those
your agent is
moments.
just as invested in your story as you are. So having that
Exactly.
relationship is super important. Um,
Exactly.
so what is so you mentioned like women of color, multicultural fiction. What's the
Hmm.
market like for that now? Because at least I know, Latino fiction, it goes up and down, and
Yes.
it went way up and then it went way down. So,
Yes. Yes.
and
I feel like it's similar, and now we're on an up wave because, of course, all the different unfortunate events that took place this year. I think
yeah.
got publishers actually moving. I can't tell you how many diversity panels I've been on, talks, focus groups over
Right,
the years, and like you have all this data and there's nothing happening. But I feel
right.
like now I'm actually seeing the acquisitions, I'm seeing the books hitting lists, I'm seeing the marketing dollars being put behind these books. So I'm hoping, if nothing else, this shows the publishers like, look, this is what you've been missing. If
Yeah,
you would have invested in these books, like, people will spend
exactly.
money on good products, but they have to know about them and they have to be done as well as the others. And they also have to be done within whatever the market calls for. And so I feel like, when I was at Hachette, I had some really successful books because we didn't just slap some generic cover on it. It's like, okay, if this is what small town romance looks like. We're going to have a scene. We're not going to put this cheesy couple that doesn't even look like the characters in the book on it, which I feel like is
Yes.
what was happening. They weren't doing photo shoots. You were getting these stock images and they weren't very good images. And it was just like, oh, well, that's what you get. And so then people look at that and they just assume the quality of the book is
Right.
bad because the cover's bad. And it's like, but no, the book is great. So, I do think that when you actually put forth the effort and you spend the money and you put the time and you have the good book, because you got to do that too.
That's right.
I think, and more often than not, it works. So I'm just glad to see that there is serious enthusiasm. I'm seeing more editors of color across the spectrum, not just Black. And that makes me very happy because there are people of all nationalities, and there's
Right.
nothing wrong with a white or non-Black person working on a Black book. But if you don't get the culture, the language, you're going to flag things or change things that make the story authentic to that culture. And that's where the problem comes when you don't have that representation in-house. So it's
Yes.
not just
Yes.
getting the books on the list. I mean, that's one part of it. But if you have someone that doesn't get it or doesn't understand the marketing of that side of things, then that hurts the book too.
Yeah, yeah. And I think at least for Latino fiction, that has been a huge problem. It's just the lack of understanding of what the various cultures are, because depending on, Mexico is going to be very different than Cuban and so forth. And a lot of times I don't think a lot of the publishing houses got that. I think like you're
Right.
right. It's just kind of generic Latino, and
Right.
that's
Let's just throw it on there. But it's like,
yeah.
no. Like, it has to be done this way. You're gonna put these authors with these outlets and these are,
Yes, yes, yes. Or even the way the
Yeah.
characters behave, it might be a little different,
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I had somebody once say something about the grandma, that the heroine was just acting like, what you wouldn't let your grandma say that to you. And it's like, do you know what Latina grandma is
Right.
like?
Like, she'll
You
tell
don't
you
disrespect your
anything she
grandma,
wants. Exactly.
She's always right, even when she's wrong. So
Yeah, exactly.
okay, very good. So where do you see like publishing in general? It seems kind of crazy right now. Everything does, but how about like going into the future, into 2021? What are publishers looking for? What should writers be focusing on aside from,
Of
writing a
course.
good story?
One thing that I will say that I'm happy about is I'm seeing a lot of mom and pop bookstores opening up. So even though some of the
Yes.
big ones might not be doing as well, I'm loving that. Right here in Brooklyn, there's one in Park Slope where the line is always around the corner to get in. So that
Wow.
makes me happy.
Yeah.
So that lets me know that people are still, buying books.
Yes.
So that's really great. I think digital books, of course, are still easier to get. So I'm hopeful that as publishers are learning how to work around COVID, we'll still continue to get good books. I know for me, I never stopped shopping things. Like, I was like, oh well, as long as they're still working, I'm gonna still keep sending. And I've sold quite a few things this year, because I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna keep sending until they tell me not to. And so I
Yeah.
think at this point, so many months in, people have really learned how to work through it. So I think that they're gonna continue to acquire. I will say the sort of the thing that people want to know is like, do you include a COVID plot line in your stories, or do you
Mm,
continue on? So far, myself included, I don't want to read about it. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm just ready to move forward, move on. I've only had like one editor really tell me she's looking for that, but outside of that, I haven't really seen anyone asking for like COVID or post. I think people just want to like get out of this nightmare.
Yeah.
So like, it's just like, I don't want to read it as well,
Exactly. Or
so where
especially like a
fiction,
year from now, right? Like a year when the book
exactly,
comes out, you don't want to, oh God,
exactly.
I wanted to forget
Yeah.
that. I didn't, yeah,
Yeah. The hope
exactly.
is that we'll be done with this, right? So,
Right.
I feel like in terms of content, people still want marketable books. They still want the contemporary fiction. They still want the women's fiction, whether it's lighter,
Yeah.
darker. I think they want it. Thriller suspense is still doing well. Mystery, historical, they have their market. So as long as you're writing the right kind of mystery and historical, and I say, look at bestsellers lists, look at, publisher newsletters and things like that to get an idea of what the publishers are looking for. It's specifically within those genres, but I know definitely women's fiction, thriller, suspense, upmarket, or sort of that cross between literary and commercial. That's really popular right now on the fiction side. And then with nonfiction, I think, inspirational, motivational books, because people are depressed right now, so they want to know, how do I make money? How do I, move on, move forward, and keep a good mindset? So those type of books sell, of course, political books, but I mean, that I think is kind of hitting its peak.
Yeah.
And as we move into the new year, I think that's gonna kind of be almost like life after,
Yeah.
this. So like political space, those books are still selling pretty popular. Health and wellness, but I do think it is a little over. There was a ton of keto books and, vegan before that. And, the quick, 5 ingredient diets before that. So that you kind of have to keep an eye on, because I just think depending on what you're talking about, for those, but that's just what I've been seeing. So, and memoir is like, it's not, I mean, it's so hard to sell memoir right now.
Really?
So oh yeah, big
Wow.
time. Yes,
That's
it is.
interesting.
So
That's
I am
interesting.
not looking for any memoirs. Sorry, guys. But people want it different. They want, your 10 tips for how you made this money, and then you could sprinkle your story in between, but they don't want I was born here, raised there, and here I am now. Like, unless you are a really notable person, or you really have people that are clamoring for your story. If not, it's kind of like, are people going to spend $25 to read about someone they don't know? And that's kind of what it boils down to. So nonfiction is a little harder. I think fiction for me right now has been a little easier to sell, especially if they're writing one of those like kind of marketable kind of stories in those genres. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Okay. And what have you sold lately? Like what are some of your authors that have sold books and that we can go find and read, or in the future?
Yes, well, none of them are out just yet. So
Okay.
come next year, you'll have a lot. My first actually released, now actually that's not true. I do have one that came out called The Anti-Racist by Kondwani Fidel that came out in September. And that is about how to kind of start the conversation and move past, race and like, what do we do? So that book came out in September. Then I have actually one of my authors who wrote a romance for Sourcebook. She has Jackson coming out in February, and that book actually got a great Publishers Weekly review. So we're like, and was an Oprah pick. So we're really excited about that. So that's Sexy Cowboys and ranches. So who doesn't want that, right? And then one of my clients, Kimberly Jones, she went viral earlier this year, talking about kind of like the looting, and her video, was basically, it was like profound, because she was kind of talking about how the financial plight of Black people was like a rigged game of Monopoly, and how they're lucky Black people just want equality, not revenge. She went viral. So I sold her that with Holt. So really excited about that coming out. I also sold another project that will be announced soon. I haven't even announced it yet, but it's a upmarket women's fiction. I sold to Holt Preempt as well. It's like a generational story about someone passing for white, and so it kind of has the vanishing half kind of elements sprinkled in, which I know a lot of folks like right now. I've sold my first audio project. So one of my urban fiction writers, it's her first time in audio. So those books will be coming out next year with Tantor and Dreamscape. So that's really exciting. And I also sold another book that I'm really excited about which deals about males and rape culture, which I don't think is talked about enough. And it's
Mm,
specifically just training our boys to not be predators. I think we always talk about what women can do, but we never talk about young boys. And the
right.
author, Gordon Braxton, has worked in student affairs with different, rape prevention, campus police, etc. So this book is really geared to young men and how to carry themselves and how to do things the right way. And that book is coming out with University of Oxford Press. So I'm really excited about that
That's
one too.
awesome. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yes.
really good.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking as a professor, right, to my English 101 students, sometimes, you have to have interesting things for them to write about. And so,
Yeah. Oh,
something
yeah,
like that,
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
something like that, I think would really spark some conversation, especially in the colleges, because that's where they're
Absolutely.
dating. And I, I, I I remember playing a video once, and it didn't have anything to do with that topic, but Malcolm Gladwell was talking, and he was saying how when you're in college, you have to, if you're a guy, you have to say, okay, now I'm going to put my hand on your knee. Is that okay? Sign
Mhm.
here. He was being really funny, but it's like,
Right, right. But it's the truth. It's the
yeah,
truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to get
To
a
protect yourself
consensus,
and
right?
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to end unless you want to add something else with what is it that you enjoy most about your job? What do you like doing? And what is your kind of daily routine?
Sure. What I love most is that being both like a freelance editor and an agent, I get to help way more authors, I think, than I could as an acquisitions editor because you are very
Mm,
limited by the house and what they want and who you can keep, who has to go, where I feel like I have freedom to choose my clients. And so I love that, if you're self-publishing or just getting your book right for the right house, I can help in that way. But then if I feel like you got the project for the clients or contacts, I should say, that I work with, like I can try to help you on the traditional side. So I really love that I can work with most
yeah.
any author. And in my day to day is pretty I'm pretty disciplined, so I do wake up really early and get my coffee, and I kind of start my day around like 7:30.
Wow.
I'm usually answering emails first thing. I don't really take any calls before 10 unless I have to. And so, day to day could be anything. It could be reading submissions, it could be reading projects from my clients, it could be getting on a call to discuss something, it could be I'm negotiating a contract, reading a contract, so
Yeah.
and before COVID, meeting with editors or publishers or other agents because I like to learn from other agents too. So I have agent mentors. So, talking to them as well. Doing conferences and I mean, it's
Yes.
different
Oh, I
now, but
miss
I've
those.
done quite a few virtual conferences. My last one actually was this past weekend. This past Saturday was
Uh,
my last one for the year. So I'm like, I don't want to see you guys till next year.
yeah.
Um,
I haven't done any virtual conferences. I don't know. It's just not, it doesn't have the same feel. I
it's
really do
not the
miss,
same
no, I
because
miss
you really
going to
are
the
in
conference.
work mode. So I feel like the energy is different because when you're at
Yes.
home, you just want to kind of be at home. So then you have to keep turning on and off of work you,
Right.
home you. Whereas when you're there, you're on. And so you're in the moment, you're enjoying it, you're really present.
Exactly.
And I feel like
Exactly.
doing it at home, it's kind of like you're kind of
Yeah.
not, it's different. It's
It's
definitely
not the
different.
same. No, no,
No.
no. So I
No.
think once things open up, that's one of the first things I'm going to see is like, where's a writers conference that I can go to just to get
Yeah.
out there with writers and industry people
Yeah.
again.
I miss
Yeah.
it. I miss it a lot, especially with the news about Book Expo. It's so sad.
Yeah. What? I didn't hear. Are they
Oh, they're
not?
done. No more.
No
No more
more?
Book Expo. No more BookCon.
Oh,
I
I
know.
wonder
Exactly.
why.
Well, I think they were already struggling and then COVID just
Oh,
took them all the way out. Yep.
uh,
Because they
well,
were
it's,
already, I think, struggling for attendance.
were they
So
really?
yeah.
Wow. Wow. Entering
Yeah,
a
for some
different kind
couple
of
years
world, I
now.
think.
Oh yeah, big
Yeah.
time. Definitely. Definitely.
Latoya, thank you so
Awesome.
much for being here, and taking time out of your busy day. And I think people are really going to get a lot out of this. And
Good, I'm glad. Thank you so
yes,
much for
yes.
having me. I'm so happy to see you. It's been so long.
I know it has. It's been so long. So hopefully we will see each other at a conference one of these days.
Yes, I hope so. Keep me posted and definitely stay in touch.
I will. Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.